Everest will never fall.
Yeah, we've been on a bit of a roller coaster with Warhammer 2 recently, haven't we? A roller coaster of emotions. A glass case, as Ron Burgundy would say. It's been interesting. I think we were all happy to see the Grom and the Paunch. Dude, someone slapped me. I always call it Grom and the Paunch. It's the Grim and the Grom. It's the Prince who was promised and the Paunch who astonishes. You know what DLC I'm talking about. We were happy to see all that content get added to Mortal Empires. It really did change the game in a lot of great ways. The Greenskins needed that campaign overhaul badly, and to see them get brought back into the modern timeline finally was a thing of beauty for sure. With that said, the spaghetti code is beginning to rear its ugly head, and I've got to say, probably the thing that worries me most about the Mortal Empires trilogy, especially when we're talking about Warhammer 3, is how one little change in code can just blow the whole damn thing up, it seems like. And it's only going to get worse when you add an entire new campaign and like 6 or 7 new factions into the mix as well. Things aren't going to get any better on that front. We've seen it rear its ugly head a couple times now. We saw it with Norska and the versioning errors that happened between Game 1 and Game 2. And the fact that they released that DLC so close to Warhammer 2. I mean, it blew everything up, and we didn't get to see Norska and Warhammer 2 for months on months on months. And then with this patch, and with plenty of the others as well, when something gets fixed, something else goes tits up, and it's not uncommon to see some pretty massive bugs hit the Warhammer 2 scene. And unfortunately, we dealt with a lot of those with this most recent update. So the Nutz N Boltz is trying to address some of them, and it has. Unfortunately, it's also causing some more issues, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But for the most part, what I've seen in the patch notes, it's looking pretty good. Let's go over the major things first. So, before we get to the Nutz N Boltz, there's actually a huge bug that was messing up everyone's playthroughs, everyone's campaigns, everyone's multiplayer battles, and that was the weapon skill bug. And this is kind of the thing I'm talking about when you're talking about game-breaking shit that's hitting everybody. I mean, it's not a good thing when any weapon skill buff is not working properly, when any weapon skill debuff is not working properly, when any change or steroid, anything that changes your weapon skill value is not working. That is a problem because there are a lot of items and abilities and campaign shenanigans that completely alter it. And entire campaigns are played to mess around with that kind of stuff. For example, if you want to grab the Sword of Cain before this beta came out, well, you might say, oh yeah, you've got 1,000+ weapon strength. Amazing, you're hitting like a truck. Well, guess what? You weren't. You were hitting at your base weapon strength. Deadly Onslaught, not doing anything. Kolek Starcrusher, not doing anything. Wanted to play with Malice Darkblade or with Kolek Suneater and give them the one-shot build where you give them Occam's Mindrazor and all their combat steroids, stack them all up. Yeah, it might say, yeah, you're hitting for 1,100 damage, but you weren't. You were hitting for 450 or 500. That's obviously a huge issue. That was addressed in the last beta. This is a beta that is adding quite a bit more content to the fold and fixing a lot of our biggest problems with the Orc Big Boss, Black Orc Big Boss, and quite a few of the other things in the Greenskins campaign. So, quick overview here. Diversified some of the Orc tech tree bonuses, reduced some higher tier Orc recruitment times, which is great. Think about big guns, think about giants, think about a lot of units who typically don't want to recruit in Greenskins campaign. Seems like that is being addressed, which is great, and there's some unit balancing that we'll talk about at the end as well. So one of the design issues that's been plaguing the Greenskins in the base game, not in the beta, is that Goblin tech buffs all Gobos, while Orc tech typically relies on buffing a specific subset of the Orc roster. And that kind of made it awkward, because it meant that you had to invest more on your skill trees, more of your skill points into getting your Orc boys or your big guns or your Black Orcs into a position where you really want them to be, whereas with the Gobos, everything you did was buffing them up into the stratosphere. And we've already seen the ramifications of that with Grom the Paunch's campaign. Now, not all those buffs are completely attributed to this design flaw, if you even want to call it a flaw. I personally think it is. Some people might not, but obviously some of it's due to Grom the Paunch's ridiculous feast buffs as well. But there is an issue with our tech tree, in that all Gobos receive all buffs, and we've seen these Kaioken goblins with 75 melee attack, 120 leadership, ridiculous weapon strength, which you actually weren't feeling the effects of because of the weapon skill bug. but they're just absolutely crazy. The goblins get insane if you're playing as Skarsnik or Ground the Paunch, which is fine. I think that all lords should be able to buff their units up like crazy, but that's a huge section of the roster that is typically absolute trash that becomes absolutely, maybe game-breakingly godlike on the other end of the spectrum. This is beginning to address some of those problems. So for example, Evier clubs used to apply only to Savage Orcs. Now it'll be to all Orc infantry. That's Orc boys, that's Big Uns, that's Black Orcs, all of it. So you're now not investing only in buffing up your Savage Orcs or only buffing your Orc boys. Now you're hitting everybody, which is nice. Heavy metal, same thing. Now one of the things with the Orcs is that they do rely heavily on their melee attack, but they have so many ways to get it. They can use Wa, they can use the Bonewood Staff from Warzag, they have just a plethora of ways to buff their melee attack, so losing this is not a big deal. Getting plus 10 armor to make them a bit more resilient on that front line, probably a nice little change on the tech tree. Weapon strength, also something they rely on, but their charge bonus and their melee attack are really the two big ones, and those are the two things that WoW buffs. Again, plethora of ways to buff those things up, so losing 5% there, not really a big deal, and as you can see, they're trying to move away from leaning so heavily on weapon strength, instead shifting it into other areas where they were maybe a bit weaker, which I have no problem with whatsoever. So now better arrowheads will rely on buffing up all your missile infantry, not just the goblins. And this is interesting. I like this change a lot. It's not a big one. Recruitment costs for the Greenskins, not a big deal. You're going to be rolling it in anyway when you're sacking, when you're raising, when you're raiding. Your economy gets crazy. I mean, I think that's one of the craziest things about the change in the Greenskins campaign overall, is that their economy is absolutely bananas. And you can get real rich real fast. Might make it a little bit too easy, but that's a topic for another time. So recruitment costs, not a big deal. You're going to be swimming into teeth, so giving them some speed. This is one of the weaknesses of Orc boys, or Orc boar boys rather. I mean, let's be honest, they kind of suck anyway. They're not meant to be a super elite tier cav, but they're slow. I mean, they're 66 speed, I think, is their base. And that means they are outstripped by the majority of heavy cavalry in Total War Warhammer 2. There are some other heavy cav units that move at the speed, Chaos Knights, Reichsguard, that kind of thing, but getting 10% doesn't sound like a massive amount, but that's, well, it should be around like 6 speed or so. So that's nice. Being able to move quite a bit quicker will be pretty beneficial. So Combo Crackdown, speed for infantry, kind of irrelevant, doesn't really matter. Scrap upgrades, padded shields out for the boys, missile block chance reduced from 40 to 30, and now grants 15 armor, which is a big boost to the survivability of Orc boys, which are kind of a forgotten unit. I mean, you use them a lot in the very early stages, and they quickly get phased out. This should hopefully alleviate that issue to an extent. I mean, missile block chance reduced from 40 to 30 is really not much of a nerf at all. The AI is not good at focus firing on your front line. Your Orc boys are never going to be in a lot of threat from being shot up anyway, but the plus 15 armor is a big boost to their survivability in melee combat, which is where you're always going to be using them. So I think that's a good change. Now, these are huge. These are massive, and it's not just hitting the Greenskins, it's also for Norska as well. Big Guns, Savage Orc Big Guns, and Boar Boys recruitment time reduced from 2 to 1 turn. Thank God. We've been asking for that for years, and we finally got it. So hallelujah. Gork and Mork will be pleased with that one for sure. Norskin Giant and Greenskin Giant recruitment times reduced from 3 to 2 turns as well. Yeah, those are huge changes. That's going to make the Giants a lot more appealing for the Greenskins. They've already buffed them up in some other ways. The scrap upgrades help somewhat on that front. There are a lot of things that have made them more appealing, especially being reduced from tier 5 to tier 4. Massive. But yeah, the recruitment time reduction there, I really like that change. Now, as I said, Spaghetti Code been rearing its horrifying, ugly head, and it had some very detrimental effects on our playthroughs when the Grom and the Grim went live. And these are some big ones. So, for example, the infamous Gotrek problem. Essentially, if he died or was wounded in battle, there was a good chance it was going to completely butcher your playthrough and you wouldn't be able to continue. because whenever you open the Recruit Lord slot, the whole thing would just crash desktop. Yeah, not good. That's been fixed. Thank you. Awesome. I do not know. I've not seen anything. Let's actually Control F it. If there's anything addressing, there's not. Okay, that's a problem. Yeah, dude, I wish they would focus, and now to be fair, I don't play multiplayer campaign. I'd like to get into it, because I think it is by far the best way to combine every awesome element of Warhammer 2. I just haven't found someone that I really want to play with. I'd like to play with Italian. We've thought about doing some before, but never seem to find the time. But there are issues with that going on right now. There's a desync that just completely butchers people's ability to play. I mean, once you desync in a multiplayer campaign, it's very hard to continue. So, doesn't seem like this beta is addressing that. I don't blame them, because they are trying to get like the really major things out where lots of people are affected. But I'd still like to see them put a little bit more time into multiplayer campaign and get that fixed up for the people who play it. So it doesn't seem like this is doing that though. Let's see the big ones here. I don't know what those are. I haven't really had too many crashing problems in general. Oh, this one is big. You guys know this one. This has gotten a lot of press, obviously. Gambling Winds of Magic will no longer give the same result each time. But yeah, I mean, we've been seeing that plenty. Anyone who's played campaign over the last month or two has seen this. Essentially, if you go into a battle with 17 Winds of Magic and you vote on Randall, summon him to try to give you more, it re-rolls 17 every single time. You go into a battle with 12, it'll be 12. When you re-roll, go in with 69, you'll re-roll it with 69. So yeah, that was pretty obnoxious. Glad to see that get addressed. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so this one's a big one, and I've actually copied down the exact changes. So a stauncher skill tree. Let's shift on over to Microsoft Word. We got some spaghetti bolognese. We got some weapon skill bugs. Already talked about that. Oh yeah, by the way, he did get his voice back. So the Big Boss, the free LC in the Skulls for the Skull Throne update, he didn't have any voice lines. That I assume was bugged, because they do have voice acting for him, and that's now working properly, which is great. So, Back on Your Feet is the first. Gives 4% replenishment for orc units in the army. Well, there's already a million ways to stack up replenishment right now, so I actually don't think this is too much of an issue at any point now. I mean, you're great on this front after the changes to their playthroughs. I mean, CA did a great job on that front. The wall replenishes quick. Your army's replenished quick. It feels good, man. But here's another one, so I mean, I'm not gonna complain about that. 4% extra is pretty substantial. Boss of the field, 20% vigor loss reduction for orc units, and 30% cooldown reduction to get back here and smash them faster. Leadership buffs. So the thing about the Big Boss, we know he has that AoE immune to Psych, and we know he has to get back here for the plus 16 leadership. So essentially what he does is he's a line holder. He's there to buff up his orcs and keep them in the fight. One of the biggest issues Greenskins have is their morale. Putting this on cooldown a lot more is really, really good. I mean, it means you get that huge leadership bastion quite a bit more during the course of the battle. And the vigor loss reduction is an even bigger thing, because we know how big an issue vigor can be for any army. When you're very tired or exhausted, your units are fighting at about half their traditional effectiveness. So any way to reduce that problem for you is going to be really useful. Line Cracker plus 10% speed and gives Deadly Onslaught with 40% cooldown to it. Someone said awesome. Yeah, that's pretty good. Definitely good. When he's on that boar, getting that 10% speed is incredibly useful, especially because he can actually beat up on stuff. I mean, the Black Orc Big Boss crumps things in duels. He's got Lord-like stats and a Lord-like cost on top of it, so meaning that he can get in on top of his duels faster and close down those high-value threats. Important for sure. And then one orc army, additional casualty replenishment for his assault garrison, then 20% reduction in hero action cost. Cool. Armed to the teeth, bonus versus large, and 30 extra AP. And I believe they have changed his... Let's see. We go back here. Yeah, they've changed his weapon split, I think. His armor piercing split. That might be down here though. Yeah, okay, we'll get to that. And actually, let's just do it now. Yeah, less base weapon damage and more AP damage, so they're making him a bit more of a duelist now too. He's a really good hero. Like, the Black Orc Big Boss is super good. Like, against Undead, having that immune to Psych and the leadership buffs, it's pretty amazing. And now just making him stronger in melee, more AP. Like, yeah, they're making him really strong, but you got to spend a lot to bring him to the field. So I think that's a decent way to balance him for sure. All right. Grimgore now gets more bonuses for Black Orc Big Bosses too. So faction effects, he can now recruit them in all regions. I like that quite a bit. Be able to get them early and often, get a bunch of them in your armies. I think it's going to be pretty common to see 2 or 3 rolling in majority of your stacks. And then new skill, Best of the Best, provides +2 capacity for Black Orc Big Bosses too. You can get more of them. Althorion, I think we ran into that in my Althorion stream. I auto-resolved the battle, and then one of their lords got permanently disabled, which is weird. Nothing too crazy here. Emmerich's long campaign victory can be accomplished. But well, that is good. And I haven't run into that, but I guess for someone who did run into it, yeah, it's a nice little change. Let's see. Anything that really jumps out? Okay, this one huge too. So yeah, Marauder Chieftains got hit by the Spaghetti Code hard. Their entire skill tree went the way of the dodo, just disappeared. It got asteroided into the next dimension, but it's back now. Yeah, they had a super generic skill tree for the last like month, and the betas finally fixed that and addressed that. I like it. Yeah, there's the voice acting for the Black Orc Big Boss. So Norscan campaign in general sounds like it's going to be a lot more fun now. Giants are maybe a little bit more attractive, although Mammoths overall are still going to be better in pretty much every capacity. But well, with the Norscan Giants at tier 4, which I think they got moved down to tier 4 too. Maybe not. Maybe not for Norsca or Chaos yet. That might have just been a Greenskin thing. Let me know in the comment section. I'm not actually sure. We got a more lore-friendly name for Karak Ungor now. Because, of course, the Greenskins have it under their control. That is all Azag the Slaughterer's territory. And, yeah, cool stuff. Okay, yeah, fightiness from the effect bundle. Nice little layover from days long gone. That's been addressed. Okay, unit balance changes. This is what many of us are here for. Let's get into it, shall we? So, for the sadomasochistic edgelords of not Canada, we've got Ravagers of Rakarth and Scourge-Runner Chariots getting their health per entity change from 1256 to 1166, which is not actually a nerf, it's a rollback of an unintentional buff from a patch ago. So I don't know if that was part of the Spaghetti Code or not, but they were not intended to receive any health buff. They didn't need it, they certainly didn't need it, and this is just re-rolling back that change that was never intended in the first place. And it's interesting because Scourge Runners, even after their nerfs from a couple patches ago, I mean, they were just absurd when Shadow of the Blade first came out. They're still really good. They're game-breaking in some matchups. Against Bretonia, for example, the Purveyors of Prima Nocta love playing High Elves and Wood Elves. They crushed those two matchups. And the Dark Elves were about even with them. I'd say it was about a 5-5, 50-50 matchup for them. And then Shadow of the Blade came out, and this unit by itself completely changed the game. Completely shifted it in the Dark Elves' favor. And Bretons hate these guys with a burning passion. So it's interesting to see that. I mean, I'm glad. It's not a big deal either way. Like, it's 500 HP. It's not negligible, but it's hard to notice on Chariots. But I mean, that's one of the things that's kind of crazy about the Scourge Runners is they have high armor in the first place. Killing them is not very easy. They only have 3 entities, so 500 additional HP. I mean, that was, yeah. I mean, it's about 150. That's about 100. So it would have been 300 HP. Yeah, I mean, it's not negligible. I'll say that. But it's interesting to see that get rolled back. Probably good overall, I'd say. Greenskins, Orc Shaman on a Warboar getting some additional AP damage. Black Orc Big Boss, already covered that, getting more AP at the cost of base weapon damage. And the Goblin Great Shaman on a Spider Shrine is an interesting one. He's getting more melee attack, 4 more. He's getting 900 more HP on Ultra unit size. For some reason, I don't know why CA uses Ultra for these unit balances when they've said themselves they balance the entire game around large. So that's one of the things I'd like them to change in these patch notes to make it a little bit more readable. Because everyone looks at these and goes, wow, I didn't know they had that much HP. Well, they don't. That's only on Ultra. On Large, this is more like 6,500 or something, or like 7,000. Maybe not even that. It's a lot less. So yeah, that's just something to be aware of. But ultimately, that's still going to be like a maybe 700 to 750 HP buff on large, I would think. So, I mean, that's not negligible at all. Reload skill, and then arm. Okay, but he's losing 30 armor. Interesting. I kind of liked it before. Kind of liked that he was different than the other Ragnarok and had more armor, but maybe a little bit less HP. But I guess they're just making him more like an Ragnarok spider, which makes sense because that is indeed what he is writing. It's weird though, because the introduction of the Goblin Great Shaman and the Ragnarok Spider Shrine, as much as I love it, and I do love it, it is completely overshadowing Night Goblin war bosses now. And I don't know why you'd want to recruit one in campaign at this point. So maybe that's something they need to think about addressing at some point later down the line. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, there's so much content in this game now and so many lords, things are going to be forgotten. I'd say losing Night Goblin war bosses would not be the biggest blow ever. I mean, on a Cave Squig, they still got 40 bonus versus infantry, so that's not useless. I'll say that. Snotling Pump Wagon. Okay, this is a big change. Yeah, they were too cost effective, in my humble opinion. 450 for what you got out of that. The amount of infantry blending potential they had was pretty insane. So 50 price increase, I think, is fair to start out. They no longer have the poison contact effect on any of these. Though, I thought they only had the poison contact effect from... Oh, you know what? I always think of the Regiment of Renown one, but I guess they did, I don't know. I actually have no idea. It seems like this was on all three. I didn't even know they had a poison attack, to be honest, at all. But maybe I should have paid more attention. That's crazy. Because you can definitely see the mushroom explosion on the Regiment of Renown, but I'm not sure I ever saw it for any of the normal Snotling Pump Wagons. Anyway, plus 50 is a good change to start out with. This is a huge buff. Damn. It's a 33% increase to ammo. So yeah, this unit was already... I don't know why they're changing it like this, to be honest. Maybe they looked in the stats and saw, hey, no one uses Althar's Raiders. They're not a bad unit. I feel like I've seen Umayas and some very good Dwarf players make good use out of them. That Marked by Althar is very good. 4 more ammo with the amount of damage they can unleash per volley, unless I'm misunderstanding what this means, is a huge buff for them. So that's interesting. I don't hate it. Now, Silver and Guard are an interesting unit, man. That they are a staunch line of spears. There's no other way to put it. Yeah, I think a lot of people were feeling like they were a little bit too strong. So they're going to get 2 additional base weapon damage, but lose some AP instead. I think it's fair. And only in multiplayer, they're going to get a 50 gold price increase, which I also think is fair. I'm fine for them to stay how they are in campaign. In multiplayer, probably a little bit too cost effective, probably a little bit too good against too many units. I mean, I've used them quite a bit, and they can pretty much go toe-to-toe with... I mean, they'll beat up, like, berserkers and stuff. It's weird, dude. Like, they do really well. That combination of high mid defense, the high AP they had, the magic resist, the high... I mean, everything. Martial prowess, like, they are a tough line to crack, and they were probably a little bit too cost effective, so... Good change there, in my opinion, and this is also a good change. Eltharion is completely overshadowed by the other Elf Lords. There's really no point in bringing him. I can't think of a single matchup where he's the go-to. You can bring him on foot against, like, Vampire Coast if you want to meme a bit, and he's not bad in that capacity, but on Stormwing, on his Griffin just doesn't bring enough. I mean, compared to Karl Franz's Deathclaw, like, Stormwing is just not very good. It's not that he's bad. He's a good Lord, but he was overcosted. And that's the biggest problem. He's a versatile hybrid caster who's paying a lot of money to be versatile, but his lore of magic isn't amazing. He just needed a price reduction, and they've done it here. So I don't know if this will be enough to make you want to pick him over Alariel or Teclis. Probably not, but it's at least a step in the right direction. So happy with that change for sure. Ratonia, Repents is going to be moving faster now. Good, so she can keep up with her Grail Knight companions better. And charge speed also changed. You'll never ever see the difference between those two, but this is substantial. I believe Grail Knights move at 76 speed, so getting her to 75 instead of 70 means if you're rolling her in a control group with them, you're not slowing them down really, which I like. And she'll be rolling with questing knights and stuff too. I can't remember the movement speed of questing knights. They're not quite as fast as Grail Knights, and questing knights right now are considered a better unit in multiplayer than Grails are, and they might have more. I think in campaign you probably want to go Grails, but yeah, questing knights either way, like she'll be moving faster, can support her cavalry better. It's a good change. Okay, well, you guys know all about these. We've talked about them before. Yeah, that the power creep video, the ability video. It seems like, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't just my video that kind of worked our way towards these changes, but I probably had something to do with it, I would think. They do usually watch those kind of videos. They've told me so in the past. So we've got Lord of Dragons, Fermented Fungi, You're Next, They Need Stab and Spinning Loons, and Loons of 8 Peaks all changed a bit. And what we're going to be seeing here, generally speaking, the way CA have decided to rebalance a few of those is to just lower their cast range and their duration, which I think is fair. So the biggest issue I had was that Emmerich, for instance, would be debuffing some unit across the map, any unit, from 150 meters away. That's kind of gross, right? Like, that's not a dueling ability. I mean, Emmerich's not even known as a duelist in the first place, but if you're going to give him a dueling ability, then make it a dueling ability that has low range, right? Like, that's the point of dueling. If you're just saying, hey, F you and your stats from across the map, it doesn't have anything to do with who you're dueling. Like, if I'm a Star Dragon, I'm fighting on one flank, I shouldn't be able to debuff your heavy cav on the other flank. So by changing the range from, well, cutting it in half, essentially, that is going to make it more likely that whatever you debuff is what Emmerich is going to fight, what Grimgor is going to fight. I like that change. Duration reduced by 8 seconds there. Here, duration cut in half. It's a rampage. We've already talked about, and it's funny because there are a lot of people who are like hating on the fact that I didn't like this ability, but everyone was in complete agreement that rampage sucked for lizardmen. So why are we suddenly liking rampages that make enemy lords start dying? Like, I just don't think it's a thematic or fun way to play. There's already a plethora of crazy tools that completely dumpster enemy lord stats. Why are we adding abilities that make you lose control of them as well? There's a net. There are plenty of nets in the game, but they don't make you lose control of the lord. They don't force the lord to go into a really bad position. They just freeze them in place. So yes, if I do something stupid like float over a bunch of Way Watchers, I'm going to get netted and I'm going to get shot up and it's going to be bad. But at the very least, it's not making me throw my lord into the teeth of the enemy army from which there is no escape. Once the net is over, I can run away. With a Fermented Fungi mechanic that was lasting for half a minute, more than half a minute, if I land in an enemy army on the ground, my lord's just dead. He's not getting away. Greenskins have too many tools with poison and fast movers and wolf riders and goblin big bosses that they'll rout my lord, no matter who they are, and then just run them off the map. So I felt like with how long that was lasting and the fact that it would throw your lord into a really bad position, whereas a net just freezes them in place, I felt like it was maybe a little bit too much. So CA felt so too, apparently, cut it in half and the cast range down 25. I'm glad they didn't do it quite so dramatically like the one they did here. It's good that they didn't like cut it in half. I think 75 is a fine cast range, and it's a much less dramatic change. So same thing with Grimgor. Cast range 150 to 75 makes it more of a dueling ability. I think that's a good change overall. They need stabbing, same thing. I still think that for 479, I think is what it is, for a Goblin Big Boss on a Wolf, that minus 30 armor and minus 24 melee defense, I think is what it is a pretty crazy debuff, stackable debuff that you can keep on a lord for the entirety of a game if you alternate between the two Goblin Big Bosses. But with the Black Orc Big Boss and some other heroes coming in and being pretty useful in quite a few matchups, probably won't be seeing the double Goblin Big Boss as much, so it's not as big a deal. And this does make it more of a dueling ability, so again, fine with that for now. See how it shakes out, and if it's still OP, it's still OP, but it probably won't be as big a deal now, because you can't say, hey, Emmerich, you're 150 meters away, you suck. be afraid of my terrifying 450 gold wolf. That didn't make any sense. Alright, spinning loons. Cast range is lowered. Really small change there. I mean, hardly noticeable. But this is a big one. No longer cast if the unit is below 25% health. It appears that the Epic Loonies might still be able to do so when they're below 25% health. I'm not sure. As the Regiment of Renown, if that's how you want to handle that, that's fine. Did feel like the Epic Loons were already a ubiquitous pick in a ton of matchups. Maybe like all the matchups. So this change where you can cast them is a little bit weird to me. I'm not sure that I like that they can teleport, but I think a lower cast range is fine. It means it's harder for them to kill your archers in the back line. And overall, I will be curious to see how that shakes out in a actual battlefield capacity. So, Greenskins, in a very good spot in terms of multiplayer right now. I think they're a very strong faction. And even with a few of these changes to abilities, I don't think this is going to be particularly detrimental to them. And I don't think this will be particularly detrimental to the High Elves either. Their lords are already godlike. And Azure are in a pretty good situation anyway. But it's a really awkward position Creative Assembly find themselves now with COVID-19 and with their quality assurance and their ability to release content that isn't riddled with massive game-breaking bugs. I'm not mad at the fact that this is one of the buggiest releases we've had in a while. I think in this situation it can at least be partially forgiven, simply because of how crazy the world is right now. The fact that the entire team is working from home and has been, I think that correlates pretty strongly with the fact that there is a pandemic going on. So there's an element that says, okay, I can give them some slack. On the other hand, massive game-breaking bugs are nothing new to Total War games, and I am nervous for the future when I'm thinking of Warhammer 3, for instance, in that one little scrap spaghetti piece of code seems to be able to cause massive reverberating issues throughout entire playthroughs, and in some cases force people to abandon them entirely. And that's scary when you're talking about adding a full new game on top of everything else with many new factions, an entire new region of the campaign map. I am worried for the future that we'll end up hitting some kind of crazy snag and it will completely kill off huge portions of the game for pretty substantial amounts of time. Hopefully that never happens, but I can see it happening when we've had stuff like Norska and we've had releases like this one that are in the Gotrek bug and the weapon skill bug and blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're going to have to go a month and a half, 2 months probably, before we get all these issues addressed, and it's still not going to fix everything. And even with this beta, for instance, there's a new problem that's been rearing its ugly head. Greenskins and Norska apparently can't confederate if you manually fight a battle in which you kill their faction leader. So if you're Wolfric and you kill Throg on like turn 5, you can't confederate them. There won't be a confederation pop-up. Same thing if you're Grimgore and kill Gorefang Rotgut early on. You can't confederate them on the beta. I've heard if you auto-resolve it, the confederation thing will pop, and you can confederate them that way, but that's still a problem, especially in the early game, because you can't afford to be auto-resolving that early in a play session. So, yeah, hopefully that gets fixed. I've not seen it myself. I'm not actually playing any campaigns on the beta yet. I will hopefully do so soon. But, yeah, like, that is one of the huge new mechanics for the Greenskins. Bit awkward that has shown its head here in the early stages of the beta and people have already noticed it. So yeah, I am a little nervous. I can cut some slack in this situation. I mean, normally I can anyway, but especially because of COVID and all of that craziness. But man, like, I really hope that we don't run into another Norska for Warhammer 3. And it seems like maybe it's something we're trending towards if Creative Assembly can't get that quality assurance in order and deal with it a bit more stringently. Do a little bit more bug fixing before we get the DLC in the first place. Hopefully that is something they can address moving forward. Overall, pretty happy with the beta patch from what I've seen on the patch notes anyway. And I was quite happy with the DLC. But yeah, these bugs they can be pretty killer. So, hope you guys enjoyed this look at the patch notes. and let me know what you think of it, and I will see you all in the next video. Any Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.